Welcome to the World Extreme Medicine Podcast. My name's Jen Sherman, doctor, coach, and expedition medic. If you are a paramedic, doctor, nurse, physio, or indeed anyone working in healthcare who has a curious and adventurous mind, then this is the podcast for you. Today we're going to be talking about what it is and what it means to be a full-time adventurer. And to explore this with me in this episode, I have the pleasure of welcoming Bex Band. Bex is an adventurer, an author, speaker, and she advocates the outdoors adventure and conservation. She's the founder of Love Her Wild, which is the UK's largest women's adventure community. And previous adventures for her have included hiking 1,000 kilometres across Israel, kick-scooting the length of the USA, and crossing the Jordan Desert. Bex has been recognised as one of the UK's top 30 inspirational entrepreneurs, and for her work advocating women in adventure, she's been shortlisted for a National Diversity Award and in 2018 was given Legacy Maker status on the San Miguel Alternative Rich List. Wow. Welcome, Bex, to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me. That was a very good introduction.
It's a very impressive introduction.
Picking me up a lot.
But yeah, so I thought we'd start, just dive straight in, because I know that you've been recently working really hard on a book deadline. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about the book.
Yeah, so that's been consuming, I was about to say it's been consuming my last months, but actually what's been consuming my last months is a baby. And second to that has been book writing. My book is about my first big adventure I did. You mentioned it, hiking the length of Israel. So it was 1,000-kilometer trek on the Israel National Trail. It's a relatively new trail that not many people have heard of. And it was this absolutely phenomenal experience. I'd never done anything like it before. It completely changed my life in lots of different ways. And one of the ways it changed my life was launching Love Her Wild, the women's adventure community. And that's what my book's about. So it's a little bit about the story, like my life before going on that trek and what kind of resulted in me doing something so extreme and so out there and so out of my comfort zone. But really, it's just about what happened along the way and the changes and how that kind of gave me all the confidence I needed and all the perspective to be able to start living life a little bit on my terms. So I've really enjoyed writing that over the last I'd say few months, but really I think I started it the first lockdown, so it's almost been a year. It's been great going off to another place and reminding myself that adventures are still out there as and when we're allowed to get out the house.
Yeah, definitely. So it's really interesting because just listening to what you were saying, it very much sounds as if there was a before and an after in terms of the way things were before going to Israel and then the afterwards. So I wonder if you can dive into that a bit more. So what motivated you to trek across Israel?
So it's really hard to think back and trying to get myself in that headspace. So I was like, what on earth was I thinking? That I was at the time, actually, I was training to be a teacher, and I tried lots of different careers and lots of different jobs, and was just really struggling to find something that I was happy with, that I could get on with my life and feel content, that I wasn't just in this turmoil, always thinking about kind of waking up and dreading to go to work, or thinking about, maybe I should change jobs because I'm not really happy, or should I be doing more at the weekend, and just not in a good state really. And I had changed my careers from being a charity fundraiser to teaching, and thought, maybe this is the career for me. And it just wasn't. I really struggled. I got through the training fine, but I just, again, wasn't enjoying it, and it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. And I just think I got to the point where I was like, something needs to change, but mostly I just need a break. I needed a break from commuting. I needed a break from having bosses breathing down my neck all the time. And, I was getting myself in really bad places. It was, my mental health was on a roller coaster all the time, up and down. And this trek idea just came to me, and I started to become quite interested in the outdoors and adventures and camping. And I actually saw an article where they mentioned the Israel National Trail. My husband's Israeli, so I'd been to Israel a few times but not heard of this trail before, and in a moment was like, my goodness, this is what I want to do. And the next day, well, that night I told my husband, because I realized if I'm going to do this, we need to do this together. And it was a big step. We'd have to, kind of dismantle our lives, leave our jobs, take a break from everything. He agreed. The next day we booked the flights. And then, once you've committed and you've told people, normally there's no going back. So the ball was rolling, so to speak. And it was a huge change, and I'm just a completely different person to who I was before. So if I think of the person I was before, I think I was on a journey that wasn't mine, trying to fit into a world and a society that just didn't work for me. And I think that's been the case since the day I was born. I didn't get on well in school. I struggled with everything to do with school, really. Struggled to fit in, struggled to make friends. I didn't do well in class. I'm dyslexic, and it just felt like everything was working against me. And then, I found myself in adult life, and it was just the same story. I was struggling to work. I was struggling to maintain motivation, and to just get through the turmoil of everyday life, really. And afterwards, I think the biggest thing that adventure gave me was, two things. One was headspace, just a bit of breathing time to be in nature. I could just it just felt like a big sigh. And I think it was the first time in my life where I was just myself, waking up, not caring what I put on, not having to think about I needed to be anywhere for a particular time, not having to please anyone else. I just had to get up, walk, set up camp. Most of my thinking was consumed by eating. I became obsessed with food. It was a nice, simple existence, and it just felt like a breathing space. And by the end of that trek, I feel like I had built back a lot of confidence that had kind of been knocked out of me throughout my life. And afterwards, I then started to rebuild a life that was more on my terms. And I can see now how really I should have always been pursuing being my own boss and working for myself. I just do not fit into this 9-to-5 structure. I get very tired, and it comes and goes in waves. But people that know me will say I'm very high energy. I'm a very hard worker. And sometimes I just need to sleep, and I need a break, and I need to step back. So that just works really well for me, that I can wake up and I can craft my day. And if I have the energy, I work really long days and weeks where I'm working on a project, and then I step back and take a little bit of a break. So it's been great. It's the best thing I ever did.
Sounds fantastic. And it's really interesting because it's a common theme. There's something in what you've just said around when you went to Israel, it was the simplicity of the days. There was a lot, it was just very stripped back externally, and that allowed you headspace internally to kind of just relax and kind of find your own way and work out what your trajectory was going to be. And it's a common theme I've noticed in people who've made a bold decision ultimately to kind of do something which society's telling them not to do, which is step away from all of this stuff. So I wonder if we could just unpick that a little bit, in that what exactly do you think changed within you through that experience? I mean, what are the life lessons, or what are the pearls of wisdom that came from that journey?
Yeah, and I think the reason why a lot of people say this is because we live in a society where it's just non-stop all the time, and you never get to switch off. And I kind of felt like before it's just like juggling balls, and you're always juggling. You never, you've always got to keep an eye on the clock. You've always got to be somewhere at a specific time. There's always, jobs to be doing. Your phone's beeping all the time. People are pulling you in different directions. And this is life. This is the society that we built, that it's busy, busy, go, go, go all the time. And then suddenly when you find yourself in this adventure, and your tasks are just simple, like you don't need to, I was carrying 2 sets of clothes, one set that I hiked in, one set that I slept in and wore in the evening. It was so beautifully simple, just not to have to think about even what to wear that day. And the only thing I thought about was the distance that I had to cover ahead of me, getting water, getting food, and that was it. It was just basic. And I think it was just an opportunity to see that there's a different way of life, and we don't have to keep ourselves in this busy state just because society tells us we have to. And I really just enjoyed stepping away from capitalism and commercialism and this need to buy things all the time and be shopping and be changing our clothes and to be buying more possessions. And it was wonderful, just being able to experience a different way for a while. And I think the change was actually, I think the real change was that I just became who I was, really. So I'm not sure if it was a change so much as a letting go. So I think before I went on that hike, I was lacking confidence, and I was putting way too much energy into, thinking about social media, what I should be doing, where my next holiday should be, buying clothes, what I'm wearing when I go out at the weekend. And when you live in, if you think about how many adverts you see every day and what each of those adverts say, they're each telling you that you need to be a certain way, or you need to be doing something, or you need to be buying something. And it's really hard to kind of work out who you are in amongst all that noise. But on this adventure, I could just really take time to kind of work out who I was and become really comfortable with who I was, and kind of distinguish between what I was chasing because that's what the world tells us to chase, versus what I actually wanted to do with my time in my life.
Yeah, definitely. And you've mentioned confidence a few times, that really give you the confidence to then kind of, propel you to do all of what you've done over the last kind of 4 to 5 years. So I guess, talking a little bit about that. So you came back from Israel, and then what next? What happened after that?
So I should say, while I was doing that hike, I started a blog. Writing is something I've always wanted to do. I love writing. And I stopped doing it when I was at school because I mentioned I was dyslexic, and I started to struggle with my schoolwork. And one thing that kept coming up was my spelling was horrendous. It still is. And my work was sometimes incomprehensible, that the teachers couldn't read what I was trying to say. And I actually became quite embarrassed of my work, and I had quite low self-esteem when it came to anything that I was producing. So I remember I used to write stories when I was younger, and I remember when I got to secondary school, I kind of stopped doing that and stopped pursuing writing. And it was funny when I signed up to do this hike. I suddenly felt like I had something interesting enough that kind of justified being allowed to have a blog, even though I'd wanted one for such a long time. And it was almost like, the blog's not about me, the blog's about this hike, so that's okay. I have permission to do this. So I launched a blog, and while I was hiking, each night before I go to bed, I would just use notes on my phone to type up my blog. My journal from that day, and then when I got signal, I would upload it with a few pictures that I'd taken. And as I was doing the walk, it took 2 months to complete this walk. The blog started to pick up in popularity, and more people were reading it. And it kind of propelled me a little bit into the adventure world. I don't really know how else to describe it, but this space where there are people who are making a living from adventures or inspiring others to go on adventures. And there's one thing I noticed from the first day that I started to get outdoors, which is that I would often be the only woman. So on this hike we did, we literally passed a handful of women, and it was 90% men out hiking, doing this trail, and it was the same story in the UK. And before going on the trek, I decided it would be smart and sensible to do some courses, so I knew how to navigate and how to look after myself on this adventure. And the courses I signed up to in the UK, again, I was almost entirely the only woman. There would sometimes be one other woman, but usually I was on my own. And this in itself didn't bother me, except I was often treated differently. And it was one of the few times in my life where I suddenly became very aware of my gender and very aware that I was treated different because I was a woman. And I just put this down to the fact that the outdoor world is so competitive and it's very judgmental, and it just seems to all be built around being the first, being the fastest, going the furthest. And it felt like all the conversations were dominated by, oh, I've climbed this, no, I've climbed this, well, I've climbed this twice as fast, or I climbed this with my eyes closed in the dark. And I just couldn't compete with it, and I didn't want to compete with it. And often I felt it made people respond in a way that they would try and knock other people to pit themselves higher, and you get this horrible kind of dynamic in groups. I really, really did hate it. And by the end of the hike, I just had this overwhelming feeling that I just wanted to continue getting outdoors, but I missed being around women. I missed female company. So I decided to launch Love Her Wild, which is a women's adventure community. And it started off just as providing a supportive space where women could ask questions and also connect with other women to get outdoors or go on adventures with. And it's kind of grown from there. And now we organise our own women-only adventures and have all sorts of exciting initiatives. It's grown into this huge community that I never imagined it would be so big.
And I think one of the things I find really inspiring about you, Bex, is it's in the name of your blog, isn't it? The Ordinary Adventure, and it alludes to what you've just said, is the fact that you see yourself as being the non-adventure-y type, the non-outdoorsy type. You're not from that background, but you took on a big adventure and you've ended up being, very much in the adventure world now. And that obviously you're trying to inspire others who aren't from those type of backgrounds to just give it a go. Women, really specifically, to just give it a go, to just get outside, to just feel the benefits of being outside. And I think that that's really needed, isn't it? I think at the minute, because there is a barrier. I agree. I mean, that's been my experience as well. If you're not a certain type, you're very intimidated about trying things like even hiking a mountain. You're kind of, it just that feels very intimidating. So, I think it's such an inspiring kind of thing to then set out to basically to create. And I think one of the things also about Love Her Wild, I just wanted to ask you a bit more about, is that it's grown exponentially from when you first started it to where it is now. And I wonder how that has happened. I mean, what, because it's very easy from the outside looking in to look at this community and say, whoa, this is amazing, you've created this. But I imagine there's an awful lot that went on in the background to create what it is you've created with everything. But I wonder, with Love Her Wild, I mean, what have been the building blocks to have made it what it is?
Yeah, so it's we've now passed, so we have our main group, Facebook group, which kind of the hub of the community, where people get together and share their adventures and ask questions. But now we also have regional groups, so that women can connect with others in their local areas. And we now have over 25,000 across those groups, which is huge. And I genuinely remember being excited when there was 20 women in the group and they were all chatting, and I was like, oh, this is exciting. So never imagined it would get so big. I think one of the most important things is remembering what the community is about and what our ethos is. So as you've already mentioned, I coined my term, the term ordinary adventurer for my blog. And it's exactly that. I don't come from an outdoorsy background, and when I started out, I had no idea what I'm doing. And it surprises people that now they often look at me and they think, "Oh, you must be this big adventurer," and it's not true. I still am afraid of the dark. I hate wild camping on my own. I get nervous going for hikes on my own. And I get nervous as nervous as the next person, and I'm not super fit. There's no way, breaking records or doing things, especially fast or and things like that. So I totally get it, and it is nerve-wracking, and I hate it when people say, "Oh, but the outdoors is accessible. No one's stopping you from going climbing that hill or that mountain." And then these are the same people who then criticize someone online because they've gone for a hike and they've gone a bit out of their depth and they've had to call for help. And it's so hypocritical, because the outdoors can be a dangerous place, so it's important that we are careful and safe, and because of that, it makes it intimidating. It makes it really hard to take those first steps, especially when people are so quick to judge. Like, if anyone wants to be put off going outdoors, just go look on forums or go look on Facebook groups, and you'll find people being mean and very judgmental on there. So from the beginning, I was adamant that Love Her Wild would not be a space like that. It will be a space where someone can comfortably say they made mistakes. They can comfortably say, this really scares me, without being laughed at or people being mean to them. And I tried to make that the core of everything we do, to remain friendly and kind, and to always have this team spirit. And I think that served really well in building something up that has really good core values that people are happy to say they're part of and happy to pass on to friends and family. So word of mouth has obviously been great for growing the community. So I always put that as the number one most important reason on why we've grown and got to where we are now. But yeah, that has been a lot of hard work behind the scenes. And I remember in the beginning when I set it up and started running this community and started seeing its potential, it sometimes felt like I was swimming against the tide all the time, and it's constant. It's just like endless challenges, especially in the beginning, that you're going to have setting up anything. You're going to get all these challenges that are thrown your way, and they don't go away, but in time you just learn how to problem solve really quickly and how to brush things aside and not take them personally. And the same challenges will often repeat themselves. So it does become easier. And I just feel like now I've got to a point that I'm not swimming against the tide, and often it's the other way. I feel like I'm being swept along the tide, and sometimes I'm trying to like slow it down a bit and rein myself in, which is great to have that switch. But yeah, I worked very hard. I learned everything I could about social media. I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this well and smart. So I'm going to learn the best time to post, what to post. I learned how to build a website, how to drive traffic to the website. I did so many things, writing articles, going and giving talks. Anything I could think of, I tried, and just chasing so many opportunities. And over time, all of those just were like, each one was like a little brick that you add to the pile. And then over time, suddenly you've got this, you've built something, you've got something that's solid and stands for something, which is great.
Definitely. So it's kind of focusing on just continuing to take very small steps in the right direction of travel, kind of like.
Yeah, absolutely. I say that often because people always saying, how do you do all these things? Now writing a book or launching something or a new project, a new idea, I just throw myself into whatever it is, and people always ask, how do you do that? And I just say, I've had the experience of building something and seeing how it just comes down to committing and then carrying out lots of small tasks that at the time feel pointless or like they're not worth it. But then when you look back, you realize that every single one of those were part of building it. So that goes the same, it's the same attitude on an adventure. Like you don't start a 1,000-kilometer walk looking at 1,000 kilometers. You just look at the next tree or the next day, and it's just small steps in the right direction.
Absolutely. And I think it's also that, I think you touch on something that is, yeah, I'm trained as a coach as well, and it always comes up in coaching, is that the doubting part of your head, the critical part of your head, all those kind of unhelpful kind of thoughts around things are always going to be there. They're never going to go away. You're never going to get to a place where they completely go away. But what you just need to do is keep taking action in the right direction, and then by doing that, you gain the confidence because you see the fruition of your actions, and then that kind of gives you more substance to then go, actually, I got the confidence now to keep going because I know this is going to work out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just that belief in yourself, and belief in the system that it works. And often the end product looks very different to how I initially thought it would look, but it kind of doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you do it and you start to realize it's better to do something that looks slightly different than perfect than to not do it at all. And everything I've done has always leads on to something else, which is great because you just don't know where it's going to take you. So obviously the latest thing has been writing a book, which was hugely scary for me, and I had no idea what to expect from the process. And now I'm coming towards the end of that, or the start of the end of that. Now it's with the publishers. I just know it's going to take me to places that I can't even imagine, and so I'm excited to see where it takes me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's the power of experience, isn't it? It's the power of kind of the doing and then the reflecting on the doing to get the learning from it that then helps you to kind of move forward, if that makes sense,
Yeah, absolutely.
Your avenues, I think. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you talk a lot as well, and you've already touched on it, around being a bit of a minimalist, around actually how adventures helped you to kind of just declutter generally. I wonder if you can, tell us a bit more about that. I mean, how does that show up at the minute for you in life?
Yeah, I love being a minimalist. And I often have to keep reminding myself because so I was actually nomadic for a few years. So after the Israel hike, I spent 3 years working on the move, and it's quite easy to be a minimalist when you can only carry a bag with you everywhere. So that's your whole life. But now we've settled and we've got a house, it's very easy to start collecting things. But I often say, like, if you're an adventurer or if you go on an adventure, you are a minimalist by default because you can't carry all your stuff with you. And when we decided we would do the Israel hike, the first thing we had to do was we left our flats, which meant we had to get rid of most of our stuff. And it was just an crazy process when we were living in a studio flat in Putney at the time. And I was like, well, if we're in a studio flat, surely we can't have much stuff. It was like the split level flat that we were in. And it's just amazing when you start pulling things from drawers, how much stuff you have. And, you start looking in your kitchen cupboards and you've got this pasta maker and you're like, God, I brought that 3 years ago and I used it once. Like, what a waste of 25 quid. And this just happens again and again and again. And I just thought, if I could swap all this like junk, because really that's what it is, and actually get the money back, we would be able to just go on this trip without having to worry about saving. So it really frustrated me that we'd wasted so much money. We then obviously did the hike and then had this nomadic life for a few years. And I kind of realized how great it is not to have much stuff and not to have to think about, think about possessions all the time. So I have a very different relationship to possessions now. I'm not emotionally attached to possessions. If I lose things, if I break things, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't upset me in the way that it used to. I used to have like very sentimental items that I used to be quite protective of, and I just don't have that now. And I really believe that if you have a decluttered, simple space, that's kind of reflective in your head as well. So I feel like I'm able to juggle so many things and keep on top of my business, because I have a nice clear head, but also because I have a nice clear space that I live in. So it feels quite calming, quite relaxing. It also means I'm not spending my life tidying and cleaning and organizing. I have a 7.5-month-old, and when if anyone, we've not had many visitors, but the few visitors we had are always like, how do you keep your house so clean? I know, because we don't have much stuff to clean. And it's not so much that it's tidy, it's just there's not that much stuff to keep it cluttered. So it definitely saves time, and it's a really holistic process. So I would really recommend, if anyone's interested in minimalism, the Minimalist is a website. It's a really good place to start. There are 2 guys that got rid of all of their stuff, and there's some really good articles on there on how to take the first steps or processes you could try, whether it's starting, in your kitchen or in your wardrobe or in your bedroom, or you just pick one place and start from there.
Yeah. And I think, one question I'm sure listeners are thinking is, can Bex make a living from what she's doing? Because I think, so many of us dream of doing what you're doing, really, actually being able to just follow our passions, follow what we're interested in, bring that to others. Yes, I think, there's a lot of people yearning to do that, but what holds them back is fear and also money, really. Am I actually going to be able to make a living from this? So, I mean, you're really open on your website about that aspect of what you've created. So I wonder if we could just, if you could just talk us through a bit around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I've always been an open book with money, and I'm quite happy to tell people how much I earn and how much I spend to maintain this lifestyle. And I think that's really important, because I remember there was a point where I was looking at people like me thinking, oh my goodness, I want to do this. And they're, on their social media saying, you can do this, just quit your job. And I'm like, yeah, but like how? Like, how do you actually earn a living from doing this, from pursuing your dreams? And so I always said I would be completely honest. I would quite happily share how I make my income, in what ways, and what my tips are to help other people reach there. And I remember only a few times I've heard this, that if you pursue things you love, that you don't need to worry about money. Money will happen. Like, you'll end up making a living from it. And I can kind of see that does happen, but they miss the part where you have to work quite hard to make it happen. But it is true that now I don't worry about money. I don't think about money, and I'm confident that I have lots of different avenues I can try if ever something wasn't working. And I think that's because I've built myself a good foundation. As I hate using the term influencer, but I don't really know how else to describe public figure or influencer, however you want to describe it. I have a social media account. I have been active. I've been a spokesperson. For me, it's all about adventure and outdoors, and sometimes conservation as well. And having that platform is a really valuable thing, that I can decide I want to give talks, so I can up the amount of talks I give and earn a living that way. I can decide I want to do more writing, so I can put out some pictures and get some writing work. Once you've got a bit of a name for yourself, it definitely becomes easier. And I have lots of different ways that I earn an income. I think that's really important if you work for yourself, so that if something happens, you have the ability to put more effort into one pot and it doesn't all collapse. The most important thing, I should say, when I started out kind of changing my career, so really I would say it took me about a year to 18 months. We left our jobs, hiked the length of Israel, and then had a year ahead of us before we needed to go back to work, because we had saved a lot of money, sold our possessions, put all that into savings. So we had a safety net. And within that year, I had we carried on traveling and doing some adventures, but living very cheaply. And by the end, I still had that that savings. We basically hadn't touched it because I'd earned the same amount that we had spent. So that was really vital in being able to take that step, is just having those savings and having that safety net. And then, trying loads of different things, like throwing everything at the wall, seeing what works, what sticks, and then doing more of that, basically. So most of my income now in normal times is running expeditions and trips. And on top of that, I also give talks. I do some writing. I earn a little bit of money from traffic from my website, through affiliate links and advertising. Occasionally I do sponsored posts or work with companies for sponsorship. So lots of different things, lots of different avenues. And it works. It all kind of comes together and keeps me afloat.
Yeah, but it's quite it's turning work on its head, isn't it? Because it sounds to me, I mean, in healthcare, we have this term like a portfolio career. It's mainly for general practitioners, but and you know, the thing I've always really liked about that idea and what it is you're describing is instead of it being the job in the center and then you on the periphery doing the job, it's you in the center. You know, I always think about it like an umbrella. You know, the umbrella goes up and you've got the spokes, but you're the umbrella. You know, you're the one who's driving things, and the spokes are all the things that you're choosing to do, and they're all feeding into the same thing, which is you. But it's a really different way of it's not the model of work that we're given when we're, for example, at school or when we're looking at others around us, is it? It's a different model of looking at the livelihood, or, you know, the working part of your life.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of describing it. And it's I sometimes call it a portfolio career as well, because that's exactly what it is. And it's me, or rather what I stand for, which is a spokesperson for adventure in the outdoors. And then there's lots of different ways that I can then use that to make money and earn a living. But I've got like my core values and what I stand for. And it's really, I find it a really fun way to work. And it's much more suited to my style of working or my personality, because I used to get bored very easily, and I find it very hard to concentrate on things for a really long period of time. And this way, my life is more about projects. So I'll work on a project, and then when I run out of steam, I then move to something else and use a different part of my brain or a different skill. And I find that keeps my flow of energy much better.
Yeah. And it's a much more, it sounds like it's a much more intuitive way of working.
Yeah, it is. And it's also really fun and creative. I can kind of, you know, think, what do I want to do next, or what am I really enjoying, and kind of throw myself at that.
Yeah, that kind of more entrepreneurial mindset. And because one other hat that you also wear is conservation, is a big passion of yours as well. So I mean, has that always been there, or is that something that's developed alongside the love of adventure?
So that's definitely not always been there. And it's really funny because I'm so passionate about it now. I kind of forgot that I never used to think like this. And I can't remember what it was. I think I was looking at photos the other day, and it was photos from a few years ago, maybe like 6-7 years ago. And it was Christmas, and I was just looking at all the crap I brought and all the plastic and all I would never do it now. I couldn't think of anything worse than going to a shop and just buying all this junk and wrapping it and in plastic. And I was like, gosh, that really wasn't so long ago. And look how far my thinking has come. And it's totally just from getting outdoors, being on adventures, connecting with nature. And it's impossible to not care when you spend all that time in nature and you see how wonderful it is, and you spend time with wild animals. And it's so painful to see how much our actions and lifestyles are hurting that. Adventure's being completely responsible for my passion for conservation, but it's a big part of who I am now, and a big drive for what I do, because I can recognize the more people that I get outdoors, the more future conservationists I'm building and encouraging. and I try and do as much as I can as an individual, as well as writing about it, introducing conservation into my talks, and trying to inspire others to think about changes they can make as well.
Yeah, so it's kind of, yeah, exactly. You see adventure and conservation as very much being
Absolutely.
part of the same thing.
Yeah. Well, we can't get outdoors if it doesn't
Yeah.
exist anymore, so we really need to protect it. And it's strange, it's that idea again that when you go on an adventure or an expedition, it just can completely change your way of thinking. And it's so bizarre to me now, the way we've constructed life and the way we treat animals. It's horrific. Like, even now I've got a baby, I realize all our nursery rhymes, every single book is about a farm animal. And I was like, why do we, before we learn about animals living in the forest or in the wild, do we learn about animals that live in cages that we basically use to feed us? like it should be the other way around. And yeah, it's just bizarre. And I see things very, very differently now, and it's very hard to unsee things, I guess. So I'm really hopeful that there will be big changes in the world of conservation soon.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's also the part of adventure. I mean, certainly from my own perspective, that's something that I've noticed from going on adventures or long walks or long, multi-day walks and things like that, is that I've always thought of it kind of, it's a very strong image, but it kind of blows holes in your consciousness, in your awareness. It's almost like you go from being locked into a very kind of distinct, restricted way of thinking to suddenly you begin thinking in really, really different ways. It's like it just becomes so much more expansive. And, and as you say, once that happens, you can't go back to
it's true. It's really true. And you start to, whereas before you just accept, you're not raised to question everything. And then suddenly you start questioning everything.
Yes.
And it's sometimes it's hard because I feel like I think very differently from a lot of people. And so it can be quite frustrating sometimes. But you're right that there's definitely no going back. But I wouldn't change that for anything, because I think that's how you start making things better. That's how you really start to improve the world, is when you get people who start to question things and not just say, this is the way it's done, therefore I'm going to do it, without any thought in the process.
Absolutely. No, 100%. So, I mean, just thinking about then the future in the biggest terms, I mean, what are your kind of, some of your kind of hopes and dreams for the next kind of 5 years or so, in terms of projects you're already involved in, but maybe new things as well? Where do you see things going?
Wow, it's so difficult to say. So I tried this exercise maybe about a year and a half ago, where I was like, right, I'm going to try and map out where I want to take things. And one thing I realized was I've got further than I ever imagined I would. And really that's just down to self-limiting beliefs, that I never thought I could have a successful blog, that people would pay me to talk, that I would be a published author, that Love a Wild would reach thousands of people. And, that was like pipe dream level of thinking. Remember when I started out, I was like, I'd be really happy if, 500 people read my blog. And, now I've had hundreds of thousands of people read my blog. It's crazy. And so it's quite hard for me to think of the next stage, because it's like, what is the next stage? Like, what do you do next? Where do you take that? But for me, it's very important. So with Love Her Wild specifically, I just want to make sure we keep remembering what we're about. And so I would just really like it if we can keep growing the local groups. We keep providing as many free meetups for hiking and wild swimming and camping as possible, so that we reach as many women as possible. Personally, I'd like to write more books. I've really enjoyed that. So I definitely have some more books in me. And there's always going to be more adventures. They're so addictive. So there's definitely going to be more adventures on the horizon. And I have no idea what they are going to be or how they're going to look. But I do know that the next step is just learning how to adventure with a little one in tow. So they're going to be different. But I've met so many incredible families who do take their kids on expeditions that you would think would be impossible with children, but they make it happen. So I'm determined to be one of those families as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's it, isn't it? It's as you are kind of moving into motherhood and parenthood, and then how that you incorporate that into what you stand for already. That's obviously part of who you are now as well. So so I mean, unfortunately we're kind of getting near the end of our podcast today. But I just wonder, because I'm really sure some of our listeners are going to want to pick up on some of what we talked about today in terms of following you. So what is the best way to kind of stay in touch, Bex?
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook. If you just search Bex_Band, you'll find me there. Any women listening should definitely go check out Love Her Wild. So either loveherwild.com or Love Her Wild on Facebook. So like I said, we have our main group, but then also see if you've got a local group near you that you could join, start getting involved in some of our adventures.
Yeah, brilliant. And your blog as well, it's online.
Yeah. So also if you go to bexband.com, that will send you to the blog, and you can read my musings.
Yeah. I think one thing I can definitely vouch for as well is Bex's blog is very different, because what you're very able to do is you talk a lot about your experiences, but you also distill out of those experiences what you've learned from it. And I think that's not always the case with blogs, actually. So it's that's a real strength of your blog, I think, isn't it? Is that you're discerning this. Yeah, you're discerning the learning from it and the wisdom from it, and how you've taken that forward. So I would definitely recommend checking out.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I wonder, just on that note, I mean, we've dotted around so many different things today, but I wonder if you were to leave me and leave our listeners today with, I guess your kind of your final few pearls of wisdom, or what the last 4 or 5 years have been such a massive journey for you. I mean, you could distill it down to 2 or 3 kind of lessons or bits of advice, maybe for anybody out there who's even just thinking, I just want to get outside more, I want to have an adventure, or even I want to start a side hustle, I want to be more entrepreneurial. I mean, what advice would you give?
So definitely going back to those small steps, and don't get fixated on the end goal. So I decided I wanted to write a book. My ideal was that the biggest publishers in the world would publish it. It would be an international bestseller. It would make me millions of pounds. So that's your ideal. And then I very much know that that's not going to happen, or unlikely to happen. But that it doesn't matter, that as long as I am taking the steps in the right direction. So I started those steps, which was getting a first draft together, putting a proposal together, contacting literary agents. Actually, even before that was just learning how the publishing world works. And in the back of my head, I had already accepted that if it doesn't get published, I'm going to self-publish. And while my preferred option was being published, I knew that it would be fine if it's self-published. And I know authors who've made huge successes and had amazing things come off the back of self-publishing books. So I didn't worry about the outcome too much. I just knew that I wanted to write a book. And so I started taking those steps, even if it's just sending an email, doing a little bit of research, posting on your Facebook, I'm writing a book, because if you start telling people, it becomes much harder to step away from it. So whatever that is that you're thinking, in my dream world, I would be running a blog, I would be, learning how to make jewelry, I would be, whatever it is, going on an adventure. Just start taking the steps that are heading in the direction that you want to go. Otherwise, you will become stagnant and you won't go anywhere. And the other thing that I think is really important is, I've talked about these big adventures I've gone on, and I recognize I'm incredibly privileged. I was in a privileged situation that I had a job that I could save, both me and my partner could save money so that we could then take a year out to go on our first big adventure. and also that I have family that I knew that worst case scenario I could like go and live with them for a few months while I got back on my feet. So very, very privileged being in that situation, and at the time I didn't have a baby to think about as well. But actually I've come to realize that while those big adventures are great, what matters more is finding time in nature on a daily basis as much as possible. And COVID times has really helped kind of cement that that it's fantastic that I get to go. How lucky that I get to go to Israel for 2 months to do hiking, or to America for 3 months to do a big kick scooter challenge or whatever it is. Super amazing, super incredible experiences. But what really counts is going for a quiet walk after lunch in the local woods, just having a bit of breathing time. It's a form of meditation. It's a chance just to reset, and it's the day-to-day life that really matters to your well-being and to your quality of life, basically. So don't get set on the fact that you can't do big adventures, therefore you're never going to have this big change, and just focus on making your day-to-day life the best it can be. And one way I look at this is I always say, what would my dream life look like? And I often think, oh, do you know what, I'd love to be on a retreat in Indonesia. I did a retreat in Indonesia a few years back and was like, oh, I wish my life was like this. And then I was like, why? And I was like, do you know what, it was such small things. I loved waking up and having just the most amazing smoothie bowl breakfast. I loved that there were always candles on, that there was a really nice relaxing space, that we did yoga every day. And I realized there's no reason for me not to have this in my life. So I have a really ridiculous over the top smoothie bowl breakfast every day, and it brings me so much joy. Like, don't wait to be on a retreat, just bring that retreat into your life. And it's the same with anything that's going to make you feel like you are living your best life and a really good quality of life. And I think doing those little things just make you happy. And then when you're happy, it's easier to pursue things you love, and it's easier to find yourself on the track to success and a life that's on your terms, whatever success looks like. It doesn't mean becoming a leader of a big community for everyone. Everyone's idea of success is different.
Yeah, definitely. No, 100%. I think, very wise words. And really, I think what's so powerful though about what you've just said as well is it's thinking outside the box, isn't it? It's like what you said about the retreat. It's actually going, hold on, this isn't, about this external thing. All of this I can do, and that's empowering, isn't it? Whenever you realize that you can create that for yourself at home.
Yeah, it is. And you only have one life. It's really true. So just live it to the best it can be. And I have such an attitude now, rather than wanting things all the time, or if something makes me jealous, I think, why am I jealous? Like, what does this person have that I want? And then is there a way I can bring that into my life? I'm always working to make things better, and
definitely.
Living the best life we can.
That's it. It's the mindset of abundance rather than lack, isn't it? 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I could speak for a lot longer, but I just want to say a huge, sincere thank you for joining me today, Bex. It's been a really inspiring conversation for me and for our listeners. And yes, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.